Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. My name is Caleb, and I'm here to share a story that reshaped my understanding of love, respect, and self-worth. Imagine pouring your time, energy, and hard-earned money into making someone you adore feel extraordinary, only for them to dismiss you like you're nobody in front of a crowd. It cuts deep, doesn't it? Before I reveal how I dealt with it, let me take you back to the beginning. The warning signs were there all along. I just didn't want to see them. Stay with me, because this tale unfolds in ways that might keep you guessing. It all kicked off at a startup mixer in Portland, one of those sleek events where everyone's pitching ideas and swapping business cards. That's where I met Isabella. She strode in with an air of confidence, tailored jacket, radiant smile, and a vibe that drew every eye in the room. I pegged her as a tech heiress or some big shot consultant. Her charisma was magnetic, and I couldn't help but notice her. I'm not usually bold, but I mustered the nerve to introduce myself, and we clicked instantly. That moment sparked what I thought would be a lasting connection. I'm an operations coordinator for a clean energy company, living in a modest loft in Beaverton, driving a practical hatchback, and socking away money for my dream of launching a sustainable tech startup. I'm not one for extravagance, but I'm ambitious. Isabella, however, was a different story. She was a digital marketing consultant for a trendy firm, and as we got closer, she opened up about her background. Her family wasn't the elite I'd first imagined. They were immigrants who'd carved out a decent life in the U.S. until a recession in the late 2000s tanked her father's construction business. In a flash, they went from stable to buried in debt. Isabella was grinding to stay afloat, chipping in for her parents' expenses and covering emergencies when they came up short. I respected her hustle. Life can deal rough hands, and stepping up for family showed strength. We didn't dive into romance right away. For months, we were just friends, meeting for coffee or chatting late in the night. But feelings grew, and we eventually became a couple. That's when I started seeing beyond her polished exterior. Isabella had a taste for luxury, high-end fashion, chic eateries, weekend escapes to places like the Oregon coast, and events with her in-the-know crowd. At first, I shrugged it off. Everyone's got their thing, right? I chalked it up to her way of dealing with the pressure of her family struggles. But bit by bit, her behavior toward me began to shift. She'd toss out little jabs, passing them off as humor, especially around others. If I brought up my startup plans, she'd scoff and say, "Can we talk about something that's actually happening?" Her friends would snicker, and I'd force a smile, but it stung. I told myself it was just her personality, that she didn't mean any harm. In hindsight, I was already letting her think it was okay to undermine me. Still, I was falling hard, and I brushed it off, hoping she'd come around once she saw my commitment. About a year into our relationship, I knew I wanted her in my life for good. On a starry night by the Willamette River, I proposed. She said yes, and I was over the moon. But love clouded my judgment, blinding me to the red flags stacking up. Isabella hit a financial rough patch. Her firm lost a key account, and she was struggling. I didn't think twice about helping. When she fretted over rent or her parents' utility bills, I stepped in. When a side project she was banking on fell through, I loaned her cash, no questions asked. To me, it wasn't about keeping tabs. It was about building a future together. Her parents loved me, always thanking me for my support, and I felt like part of their family. As we started planning our wedding, Isabella's birthday loomed. She'd been down, weighed by her money troubles, and I wanted to lift her spirits. I decided to throw her a celebration she'd never forget, not because she asked, but because I wanted her to feel valued. Isabella took charge of the details, choosing a ritzy rooftop venue in downtown Portland with panoramic city views. She handpicked the guest list. Her colleagues, some social media influencers she'd networked with, and a few family members. The caterer was upscale, offering artisanal bites and craft cocktails. I didn't flinch at the rising costs, even when they ate into my startup savings. I covered most of the expenses, convincing myself it was worth it to see her happy. If you're still with me, you're probably wondering what happened at Isabella's birthday party to make me question everything. Last time, I told you how I, Caleb, met Isabella, fell in love, and ignored the warning signs as I poured my heart and savings into supporting her. I planned a lavish party to lift her spirits, dipping into my startup fund to make it unforgettable. But that night in Portland would reveal a truth I wasn't ready for, a truth that would test my sense of self-worth. Let's dive into what went down, and trust me, you'll want to know what happens next. The day of Isabella's birthday arrived, and I was determined to make it perfect. I rented a sleek silver SUV to pick her up, wanting her to feel like a star. When she stepped out of her apartment in a dazzling emerald dress that caught the evening light, I couldn't take my eyes off her. This is her moment, I thought, smiling as I opened the car door. I wore a tailored navy suit, hoping to complement the upscale vibe of the event and stand proudly by her side. As we drove to the rooftop venue in downtown Portland, the city's skyline sparkled, and I felt a surge of pride. I was doing this for the woman I planned to marry. At the venue, the atmosphere was electric. The rooftop glowed with string lights. The tables were adorned with minimalist floral arrangements, and the caterers glided through the crowd with trays of gourmet appetizers. Isabella's guests, her coworkers, influencer friends, and a few relatives mingled, their laughter mixing with the soft jazz playing in the background. I didn't want to steal her spotlight, so I stayed in the background, making sure everything ran smoothly. I refilled her drink when it got low, held her shawl when she needed her hands free, and greeted her guests with polite smiles. It was her night, and I wanted her to shine. But as the evening wore on, something felt off. Isabella barely acknowledged me. She floated from group to group, charming everyone with her quick wit and radiant smile, while I hovered nearby, ready if she needed me. I didn't mind playing the supportive role. I was used to it by now. But then came the moment that stopped me cold. I was standing a few feet away when one of her influencer friends, a woman in a flashy sequin top, glanced at me and asked Isabella, "Who's that guy over there? He's been trailing you all night." Isabella laughed, a sharp, careless sound that cut through the chatter. Then, loud enough for her entire circle to hear, she said, "Oh, him? That's just my assistant." The group burst into laughter, their eyes darting toward me. I stood there, frozen, my face burning. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her, but when I caught her glance, cool, almost defiant, I knew it was no mistake. She'd just reduced me to a punchline in front of her fancy friends. My heart sank, and something inside me cracked. I waited for a chance to pull her aside, my mind reeling. When I finally got her alone near the bar, I kept my voice low. "Isabella, why would you say that? You called me your assistant." She rolled her eyes, like I was making a fuss over nothing. "Caleb, relax," she said, her tone dripping with irritation. "You're being too sensitive. Look at the people here. You don't exactly fit in. You should be thankful I even invited you." Her words hit like a slap. Thankful? For being humiliated? I searched her face for a hint of remorse, but there was none. She turned back to her guests, leaving me standing there, invisible. I didn't make a scene. I couldn't. My chest felt tight, but I grabbed my coat, walked past the glittering crowd, and left the venue without a word. The cool Portland night air hit my face as I stepped onto the street, but it did nothing to ease the ache inside. I drove home in silence, replaying her words over and over. "Just my assistant. You don't exactly fit in." Each syllable felt like a betrayal, not just of me, but of everything I'd given her, my time, my money, my trust. When I got to my apartment, I sat on the couch, staring at the wall. The party wasn't fully paid for yet. I'd agreed to cover the final balances for the caterer and the venue's decor team after the event. But after what Isabella pulled, the thought of sending another cent made my stomach churn. I decided then and there, I wasn't paying another dime. Let her figure it out. For the first time, I felt a spark of resolve, a refusal to keep bending for someone who didn't value me. The next morning, my phone buzzed with Isabella's name. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. She left a message, her voice casual, asking me to wrap up the payments for the party like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Her words from the night before echoed louder than anything she could say now. I blocked her number, my hand shaking as I did it. The next day, she tried calling from a different number. When I heard her voice, I hung up and blocked that one too. I was done. But the story doesn't end there. Isabella wasn't going to let me walk away that easily, and what happened next pushed me to confront not just her, but myself. If you've made it this far, you're probably feeling the weight of what happened at Isabella's birthday party. I'm Caleb, and in the last part, I shared how Isabella humiliated me, calling me her assistant in front of her elite crowd, then brushing it off like I was the problem. I walked out of that Portland rooftop venue, vowing not to pay another cent for her party, and blocked her attempts to reach me. But the fallout wasn't over. What happened next forced me to face some hard truths about love, loyalty, and where I draw the line. Stick with me. This part will leave you wondering how far Isabella's actions would ripple. The days after the party were quiet, but heavy. I went through my routine, work, gym, home, but my mind kept replaying that night. You don't exactly fit in. You should be thankful. Each word was a reminder of how I'd let Isabella's jabs pile up over time, convincing myself it was just her way. I started questioning everything. Why had I ignored the red flags? Why did I think love meant swallowing disrespect? I wasn't ready to talk to her, and I didn't know if I ever would be. Blocking her calls felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, but the hurt lingered. For days after the party, I was home on a rainy Saturday afternoon, the kind of gray Portland day that makes you want to stay inside. A knock at my door broke the silence. I figured it was a neighbor or a delivery, but when I checked the peephole, my stomach dropped. It was Isabella. She stood there, arms crossed, her expression a mix of impatience and expectation. For a moment, I considered opening the door, hearing her out. But then I remembered her voice, sharp and careless, dismissing me in front of her friends. I stayed still, barely breathing, until she knocked again, waited a few minutes, and finally left. Watching her walk away through the peephole, I felt a strange mix of relief and resolve. I wasn't ready to face her, and maybe I never would be. The next week, I tried to focus on work, but the party's aftermath kept creeping in. I hadn't paid the outstanding balances for the caterer or decor, and I wasn't going to. Let Isabella deal with it. She'd planned the event, after all. I wasn't proud of leaving loose ends, but I couldn't keep pouring myself into someone who'd throw my efforts back in my face. I started reflecting on our relationship, piecing together the moments I'd brushed off, the eye rolls when I talked about my startup, the jokes that always seemed to cut a little too deep. I realized I'd been teaching her it was okay to treat me like less, and that realization stung more than her words at the party. Then, about 2 weeks after the party, I got another unexpected visitor. It was a quiet evening, and I was cooking dinner when the doorbell rang. This time, it wasn't Isabella. It was her parents, Maria and Javier. They stood at my doorstep, looking uncomfortable, their faces etched with worry. I invited them in, sensing this wasn't a casual visit. Maria spoke first, her voice soft but direct. "Caleb, we're so sorry to show up like this. We need to talk about Isabella." They didn't beat around the bush. They heard about the party, but not from Isabella. One of her co-workers, who'd been at the event, reached out to them privately and told them what really happened. How Isabella had called me her assistant, how she dismissed me when I confronted her. Maria's eyes welled up as she spoke. "We're ashamed," she said. "That's not how we raised her." Javier nodded, his jaw tight. "We've noticed her changing, Caleb. She's been chasing this image, trying to fit in with people who don't care about her. She's losing herself." They told me Isabella had spun a different story, claiming I'd overreacted and stormed out over a misunderstanding. But her parents didn't buy it, not after her co-worker's account. They were embarrassed, not just for what she'd done, but for how she'd taken advantage of my support over the years. Javier looked me in the eye. "You've been good to her, to us. We know you've helped with bills, with her struggles. We never asked you to, but you did it anyway. And this is how she repays you." Then came the reason for their visit. They weren't just there to apologize. They wanted me to reconsider cutting Isabella off. Maria's voice was pleading. "We're not saying you should take her back, but maybe you could talk to her. She's spiraling, Caleb. Maybe hearing from you could snap her out of this." Javier added, "She needs to see what she's losing. You're the only one who's ever been real with her." I listened, letting their words sink in. I respected them for coming to me, for owning their daughter's mistakes when they didn't have to. But I knew my answer before they even asked. "I appreciate you coming here, I said, keeping my voice steady. But Isabella made her choice that night. I don't hate her, but I'm done. I've made peace with moving on. They nodded, their faces heavy with understanding. They thanked me, apologized again, and left. As I closed the door, I felt a weight lift, but also a lingering sadness. Not for Isabella, but for the future I'd once believed in. What happens next will show you just how deep Isabella's choices cut, and how I found strength in walking away. You're still here, and I'm grateful. I'm Caleb, and if you follow my story, you know how Isabella's betrayal at her birthday party, calling me her assistant to impress her Portland elite friends, shatter my trust. I walked away, blocked her calls, and refused to pay the remaining party bills. Her parents showed up, apologizing and asking me to talk to her, but I stood firm, choosing my peace over her chaos. Now, the story takes a turn that tested my resolve even further. What happened next showed me just how far Isabella's choices had spiraled, and how much I'd grown. Stay with me, because this part will leave you eager for the final piece. Weeks passed since Isabella's parents visited my Beaverton apartment. The silence was a relief, letting me focus on work and my startup dreams, which I neglected for too long. I was starting to feel like myself again, piecing together the confidence Isabella's jabs had chipped away. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Isabella had a way of pulling people back in her orbit, and I braced myself for whatever came next. One evening, as I was winding down with a book, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something told me to answer. It was Javier, Isabella's father. His voice was low, almost hesitant, not like the steady tone he'd had at my door. "Caleb, I hate to call you like this," he said. "Isabella's in trouble. Real trouble." My stomach tightened, but I stayed quiet, letting him continue. He explained that Isabella had gotten herself into a financial mess, bad enough that creditors were calling her parents' house. She'd racked up debt, partly from the unpaid party bills I'd refused to cover, but also from other reckless spending, luxury purchases, trips she couldn't afford, and loans she hadn't repaid. Javier didn't sugarcoat it. "She's been lying to us, to everyone. We didn't know how bad it was until now." He paused, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "Caleb, could you help her settle this? Just enough to get her out of this hole. We'll handle the rest." I could hear the desperation in his voice, the kind only a parent feels. Maria's voice came faintly in the background, urging him to explain more, but I'd heard enough. I took a deep breath, keeping my tone calm but firm. "Javier, I'm sorry she's in this spot, but Isabella's not my responsibility anymore. I gave a lot, more than I should have, and she showed me what that meant to her. I can't keep fixing her mistakes." There was a long pause. I think Javier expected me to waver, but I didn't. Finally, he said, "I understand. I'm sorry for asking." The call ended, and I sat there, staring at my phone. Saying no felt like closing a door for good, but it also felt right. I wasn't the same Caleb who'd ignored red flags for love. The next day, I got an unexpected email from the caterer from Isabella's party. They were chasing the unpaid balance, assuming I was still handling it. I replied politely, explaining that Isabella was responsible for the event and they should contact her directly. It wasn't my proudest moment, but it was honest. I'd spent too long cleaning up her messes, and I was done. Still, a part of me wondered how she was handling it. Was she scrambling? Regretting anything? I pushed those thoughts away. Her problems weren't mine anymore. Then came a moment that brought everything into focus. A friend from work who knew about my breakup invited me to a local networking event for green tech entrepreneurs. I almost didn't go. My confidence had taken a hit, but I forced myself. There, I met people who were genuinely excited about my startup idea. They asked questions, offered feedback, and one even connected me with a potential investor. For the first time in months, I felt seen, not as someone's assistant, but as Caleb with dreams worth pursuing. That night, I realized how much I'd dimmed my own light to lift Isabella up. As I drove home, I thought about the bigger picture. Isabella's betrayal wasn't just about one cruel comment. It was the culmination of a dynamic I'd allowed. I'd poured myself into someone who valued what I gave, not who I was. And while her parents' visit and Javier's call showed they cared, it also showed how Isabella leaned on others to fix her messes. I didn't hate her, but I pitied her. She was chasing an image that would never fill the void inside her. You've stuck with me through this journey, and I'm grateful. I'm Caleb. In the last part, I shared how Isabella's financial mess came to light when her father, Javier, asked me to bail her out. I said no, choosing myself over her chaos, and started rediscovering my own worth at a networking event. Now, we're at the final chapter of this story, a moment that cemented my decision to walk away and left me with lessons I'll carry forever. This part ties it all together, and I'll leave you with a question that might hit close to home. Let's dive in. Months had passed since Isabella's birthday party, and I was finding my footing again. My Beaverton apartment felt like a sanctuary, not a place to hide. I was pouring energy into my green tech startup, connecting with mentors, and rebuilding the confidence Isabella's jabs had eroded. Her parents' visit and Javier's call were fading into memory, and I hadn't heard from Isabella herself. I thought I'd closed that door for good. But life has a way of throwing one last test your way. One crisp Portland morning, I got a text from a mutual friend, Lena, who'd been at the party. She asked to meet for coffee, saying she had something important to tell me. I agreed, curious but cautious. At a cozy cafe near the Willamette River, Lena got straight to the point. Caleb, I've been debating whether to tell you this, but you deserve to know. She explained that Isabella was in deeper trouble than I'd realized. After I refused to pay the party bills, she'd borrowed money from some shady lenders to cover them and her other debts. It backfired. She couldn't pay them back, and now she was dodging calls and living in fear. Lena had seen her recently, and Isabella was a wreck, unraveling under the pressure of her choices. Lena leaned forward, her voice soft. She knows she messed up with you, Caleb. She didn't say it outright, but I could tell she regrets it. She's too proud to reach out, but she's struggling. Lena wasn't asking me to do anything. She just thought I should know. I thank her for being honest, but as I sipped my coffee, I felt a strange calm. I didn't feel anger or guilt, just clarity. Isabella's regret, if it was real, was hers to carry. I'd given her enough of myself, and I wasn't going back. That conversation with Lena was a turning point. It showed me how far I'd come. The old Caleb might have felt obligated to help, to fix her mess out of love or duty. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'd learned that love doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity, and I wasn't responsible for someone who'd shown me so little respect. I wished Isabella well, silently, but I knew my role in her story was over. As I reflect on everything, I see the lessons this experience burned into me. First, don't ignore the small signs. Disrespect often starts subtle. A snide comment, a dismissive glance. If someone belittles you, especially in front of others, don't brush it off. They're showing you who they are. Second, you can't buy respect or love. I gave Isabella money, time, and support, thinking it would earn her appreciation. Instead, she took it for granted and humiliated me when it suited her. Real respect is freely given, not earned through sacrifice. Third, walking away can be your loudest statement. I didn't need to yell or fight to show Isabella her words had consequences. My silence, blocking her calls, closing the door, spoke volumes. It wasn't about revenge. It was about choosing my peace. Finally, someone who needs to diminish you to feel big isn't your partner. Isabella's insecurity, not her strength, drove her to call me her assistant. True love lifts you up, not tears you down. Now, I'm moving forward. My startup is gaining traction, and I'm surrounded by people who value me for me, not what I can give them. I don't hate Isabella, but I'll never let anyone treat me like less than I am again. If this story resonates with you, I hope it helps you spot the red flags I missed. And here's my question for you. If you were in my shoes, at what point would you have walked away? Would it have been the first jab, the party, or later? Think about it and let me know. Thanks for hearing my story. I'm stronger for it, and I hope it leaves you with something to carry forward.